For 6 months, she lived a lie for love. When he found out, everything changed. It all started with a glance. One fleeting moment in a crowded cafe, where noise and laughter blurred into background hum. But her eyes found him. Tall, effortlessly charming, with a laugh that warmed the coldest air. Elena knew in that instant that this man, Daniel Hart, was not just someone she wanted to meet. He was someone she was meant to meet. She couldn't explain it. Some things defy logic. Her heart simply knew. Before we continue with the story, tell us where you're watching from. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the story. They ran in the same circle, friends of friends, parties, work gatherings. She'd always been the one on the edge of the frame, laughing a second too late, waiting for him to notice. But Daniel, he never looked her way. Not really. Not like she needed him to. And yet Elena waited, hoped, because love, real love, doesn't always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it creeps in silently, sets roots in the background, and waits for a chance to bloom. Elena wasn't a dreamer. She was pragmatic, successful, an operations executive at a multinational tech firm. Sharp, respected, composed, but every time she crossed paths with Daniel, she became someone else, someone softer, someone braver. She tried once, at a barbecue, approaching him, offering a drink, asking about his dog. He smiled, nodded, polite, but distant. Her heart had dropped like a stone, and yet it beat on. Months passed, the ache in her chest growing familiar, like a wound she learned to live with. Then came a piece of gossip at a friend's dinner party. Daniel had just bought a new apartment uptown and was struggling to find a reliable housekeeper. He'd fired 3 already. No one seemed to meet his standards. Something lit up inside Elena that night. A plan formed, reckless, wild, absurd, and yet utterly irresistible. That very weekend, she quit her job, just like that. Her colleagues were stunned. Burnout, she told them. Time for a reset. But inside, she felt electric, alive. She chopped her hair short, dyed it. A deep chestnut. Traded heels for sneakers, silk blouses for cotton tees, and with a borrowed accent and forged references, she applied for the job. Daniel Hart's new housekeeper. He hired her on the spot. The first day was surreal. Elena stood in his sunlit kitchen, watching him stride past in a tailored suit, utterly unaware. Maya, he called her, the name she'd chosen. Make sure the dog gets a walk before noon. His voice held command, not cruelty, but no warmth either, just expectation. Still, her heart thudded like a drum. She was in, but here's the twist. Elena never touched the mop, never cooked a meal. She hired a discreet professional cleaner twice a week, ordered gourmet takeout from hidden gems across the city, and took detailed notes on Daniel's preferences. Over time, he began to comment, "Best damn risotto I've ever had. Place looks immaculate." She smiled quietly. This wasn't deception. This was strategy, patience, love in disguise. 6 months passed. Elena lived between 2 lives. By day, she scrubbed invisible stains and fed Daniel's dog organic kibble. By night, she stared at her ceiling, wondering when, if ever, he'd truly see her. There were moments when their fingers brushed while passing a cup, when their eyes locked a second too long. But it was never enough. Daniel remained a fortress, until one rainy Thursday afternoon, Eleanor saw him, with someone else. He stood at the corner of 5th and Lexington, arm in arm with a blonde in a red coat, laughing, leaning close, the kind of smile Elena had only seen from afar. Something inside her cracked, not with rage, but clarity. This was not her story, not anymore. That night, she packed her bag, printed a letter, and laid it on the kitchen counter beside a bundle of envelopes. All the paychecks he'd given her, uncashed, untouched. She didn't wait for him to return, didn't want to see his face. She left in silence, slipping out like a shadow, but the truth she left behind would detonate his world. Daniel arrived home to silence. Not the comforting quiet he'd grown used to, but something sharper. Off. The lights were dim, the scent of dinner absent. No soft jazz playing through the speakers, no Maya humming in the kitchen. He dropped his keys on the counter and paused. That's when he saw it. An envelope, thick, resting near a stack of smaller ones, neatly tied with twine. His name, written. In pen he didn't recognize. He frowned, loosening his tie, eyes scanning the room. "Maya?" he called. Nothing. The dog padded into the room, tail low. That was odd. She always greeted him. Always. He picked up the envelope and opened it, pulling out several pages folded with precision. The first line hit him like a punch to the ribs. "My name is not Maya." The rest came in waves. Confession. Emotion. A carefully laid truth that unraveled the last 6 months of his life. Her name was Elena. She had known him long before he ever saw her. She had loved him from afar, changed everything to be near him, lied, sacrificed, not out of malice, but out of longing. She had built a world of comfort around him without him ever realizing he was living inside someone else's love story. She explained it all, the hair, the resume, the takeout meals disguised as homemade. She described every moment he had missed, every smile she'd swallowed, every word she hadn't dared to say. "I did all this just to be near you," she wrote. "But seeing you with someone else broke the illusion. I'm sorry, I'm not angry, I'm just done pretending." Daniel read the letter twice, then a third time. His pulse thundered in his ears. He remembered little things, how she always knew exactly how he liked his shirts folded, how the dog, once indifferent, had become obsessed with her, the laughter she never shared, the tension he ignored. Suddenly, it all aligned. He hadn't been living with a stranger. He'd been blind to someone who had tried quietly and completely to love him. He ran his hands over the smaller envelopes. Paychecks. All of them, still sealed. Not a dollar. Spent. Who was this woman? He barely remembered her from before. Elena, yes, maybe at James's party, maybe once at a happy hour. She'd been kind, quiet, forgettable, he had thought. How wrong he had been. For the first time in years, Daniel felt exposed. Vulnerable. He, the one always in control, had been outmaneuvered by emotion. She hadn't asked for anything, not even a conversation. She had simply left. And now, the silence she once filled, so completely was deafening. He spent the rest of the night pacing, reading the letter again, looking for clues, details, anything that could tell him where she'd gone. He called her number, disconnected, checked the resume she'd submitted. Fake, of course, no address, no real name listed. It was as if she had vanished. A ghost. Of his own making. But Daniel Hart wasn't the kind of man who gave up easily. By morning, he had a plan. He called mutual friends, dug through old event photos, scanned tags, comments, Instagram posts. There, 3 years ago, a group picture at a rooftop party. Elena in the corner, smiling at someone else but clearly watching him. His stomach dropped. He tracked down the photographer from the event, found the original guest list, cross-referenced names until one hit. A full name, Elena Vasquez. She had worked for Verex Tech, high level, impressive. He called in favors, looked through public directories, reached out to contacts in HR. She had left without notice 6 months ago. No forwarding address, no new employment listed. She had erased herself. But Daniel was relentless. Later that week, he stood outside a modest apartment building in Brooklyn, staring up at a third-floor window where a single light burned. He had no speech planned, no clever lines, just the truth he was finally ready to face. He rang the buzzer. "Eleanor," he said when she answered. There was a pause. Silence crackled through the intercom. Then finally, her voice. "Why are you here, Daniel?" he exhaled. "To see the woman I never saw until it was too late." Elena stood frozen in her hallway, one hand still hovering near the intercom. She hadn't heard his voice in weeks, not since the day she'd vanished from his life like smoke from a snuffed candle. And now, here he was, Daniel Hart, outside. Her door, no longer the unreachable figure she had once adored from afar. But she didn't move. She wasn't ready. Not yet. Downstairs, Daniel shifted on his feet. The chill of autumn air crept under his coat, but he barely felt it. He kept his eyes fixed on the doorway, willing it to open, heart pounding with an unfamiliar rhythm, uncertainty. He, who was always composed, always 10 steps ahead, now stood powerless, waiting for the woman he had overlooked to give him a second chance. The door finally clicked open. She stood there, not as the disguised Maya he had known, but as Eleanor, her hair back to its rich, flowing length, her eyes sharper, her presence undeniable. For a moment, he didn't speak. Neither did she. The air between them was thick with the weight of unspoken months. "I wasn't sure you'd answer," Daniel said at last, his voice softer than usual. "I almost didn't," she replied, arms crossed, not cold but guarded. "What are you doing here, Daniel? The 6 months are over. You don't owe me anything." "I'm not here because I owe you," he said. "I'm here because I saw the truth too late. And I need to know if I've already lost the chance to fix it." Elena hesitated. Her instinct was to close the door, to protect the fragments of herself that had only just begun to heal. But something in his expression, raw, honest, held her still. She stepped aside. "You've got 5 minutes." He entered, slowly, as if afraid to break something delicate. Her apartment was nothing like his penthouse. Small, cozy, lived in, shelves lined with books, a tea kettle whistling softly in the kitchen. It felt more like home than any place he'd been in years. "I read your letter a dozen times," he began. "I've never been so shaken. I couldn't stop thinking about what it must have taken for you to do all that, for me." "I wasn't proud of it," Elena said, her voice steady. "It was foolish, desperate. I thought if I could just be close to you, maybe you'd finally see me." "I see you now," Daniel said, quietly. "But that doesn't change what I missed or how I made you feel invisible. I'm sorry, Elena, truly." She looked at him then, eyes searching his face for sincerity. "You were never cruel, Daniel, just unaware. I didn't want pity. I wanted to matter." "You did," he said, stepping closer. "You do. And I want to know you now. Really know you. Not as someone who folded my clothes or prepared my dinner, but as the woman who taught me that love isn't about what's convenient or obvious." Her breath caught in her throat. Part of her wanted to believe him, but trust doesn't bloom overnight. "You think it's that simple? You show up, say the right words, and everything I felt just goes away?" "No," he admitted, "but I'm not here to erase the past. I'm here to build something real from it, if you'll let me." For a long moment, silence stretched between them again. Elena looked away, eyes fixed on a framed photo of her and her mother on the mantel. Love wasn't supposed to be a performance, and yet she had performed for 6 months hoping he would applaud. Now, here he was, stripped of pretense. Finally, she spoke. "I don't know what I feel, Daniel. I've lived with this love and pain alone for so long. I don't know how to untangle them." "Then let's untangle it together," he said. She didn't respond immediately, but she didn't ask him to leave either. And that was something. In the days that followed, Daniel kept his distance, not by choice, but by necessity. Elena didn't explicitly ask him to stay away, but her silence after their conversation said enough. Still, he didn't disappear. Every morning he sent her a simple text. No grand speeches, just proof that he hadn't walked away. "Thinking of you, hope you're well, never more, never less." Elena read every message, heart pounding. She never responded. Couldn't. She didn't trust herself yet. There was still a wound where hope had once lived, but slowly, almost imperceptibly, something began to shift. The anger started to dull. The humiliation faded. In its place, curiosity bloomed. Who was this man she had loved? Who was he now? On a rainy Friday afternoon, Elena stood at her window, watching the sky pour itself over the city. Her thoughts drifted to him again. She remembered the way he had looked in her doorway, the rawness in his voice. That wasn't the man she had fantasized about. It was someone real, someone hurting, someone trying. And for the first time, she wondered if he deserved a second chance. Later that evening, she sent her first message back. It was simple. Dinner. Daniel nearly dropped his phone when he read it. He stared at the screen for minutes before replying, his fingers trembling. Anywhere, anytime. She told him to come to her place. No fancy restaurants, no curated menus, just them, face to face on neutral ground. And he agreed, without hesitation. That night, he brought wine, but she had already prepared everything. Pasta, salad, candlelight, not for romance, but for quiet. The apartment smelled like basil and lemon, like comfort, like possibility. They sat across from each other, uncertain at first, like two actors in a new scene, unsure of their roles. "This isn't a date," she clarified. "I didn't expect it to be," he replied. They ate mostly in silence, but it wasn't the suffocating kind. It was reflective, gentle, a rhythm forming. After dinner, they moved to the couch. She poured tea. He removed his shoes, small acts of vulnerability, nothing grand, but real. "I've spent weeks thinking about the last 6 months," Daniel said eventually, "and I realized I've never let anyone get close. Not really. I was always afraid of being seen." "And I was afraid of not being seen," Elena replied, her eyes not leaving his. "Funny how we were both hiding in plain sight." He nodded. "You changed everything to be near me. That should have terrified me, but it didn't. It moved me, because no one's ever fought for me like that." She took a slow sip of her tea. "I didn't do it to win. I did it because I thought I already lost." The vulnerability in her voice cracked something inside him. He reached for her hand, not forcefully, but gently. She didn't pull away. "Elena," he said, voice steady, "I'm not asking you to forget, or to love me. Not yet. I'm just asking for a chance to show you who I am now." She studied him for a long moment. In his eyes, she didn't see the man who once ignored her. She saw a man trying to rebuild himself brick by brick with trembling hands. And that meant something. "Then start here," she whispered, "as a friend, nothing more." He smiled. "I can live with that, for now." And so, they began again, not as lovers, but as two people walking side by side, slowly discovering what could be built from the ashes of illusion. Weeks passed. Elena and Daniel spoke often now. Short conversations over coffee, texts exchanged late into the night, but always under the fragile agreement: friends. Just friends. Still, something unsaid lingered between them, like a door, slightly. Ajar, waiting to be opened. Neither dared name it, but both felt it. They met for walks in the park, bookstore afternoons, casual lunches that stretched into hours. Daniel listened more than he spoke. A man once defined by confidence, now learning humility. He asked about her childhood, her dreams, the weight of growing up unseen. She, in turn, asked little of him. She wasn't sure she wanted to know who he used to be. Not yet. One afternoon they sat on a bench overlooking the East River. The air was crisp, leaves swirling at their feet. Daniel watched the water in silence before finally speaking. "I was 12 when my mother left," he said. "No note, no goodbye, just gone." Eleanor turned to him slowly. He'd never spoken about his past before. "My father raised me like a soldier," he continued. "Discipline, routine, no softness. I learned early that love was something you earned by being perfect, so I stopped expecting it, stopped chasing it. Her heart ached for him. The man who once seemed untouchable was, in truth, just a boy, still looking for his mother in every woman he met. "And what about now?" she asked. "Do you still believe that?" "I don't know," he said. "But I want to believe something different. You're helping me see that." Eleanor didn't respond. She didn't need to. Sometimes silence is the most honest reply. They sat together until the sun dipped behind the skyline, neither willing to be the first to leave. Back in her apartment that night, Elena lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She felt herself softening. That terrified her. Love, after all, wasn't just a risk. It was a repetition of hope, and hope had cost her too much before. But Daniel was different now. Or maybe she was. The next morning, a bouquet arrived at her door. Not roses or lilies, but tulips. Soft, open, simple. A note tucked inside read, "Not to win you, just to thank you for seeing me." She didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so she did both. They continued to meet, the boundaries between them blurring like watercolor. One night, after a long dinner filled with laughter, Daniel walked her to her door. The silence between them pulsed. "I should go," he said, but didn't move. "You should," she replied, but didn't open the door. His hand brushed hers, tentative. She looked at him, not with the eyes of a woman who once worshipped him, but as an equal, a choice, a mirror. "Elena," he whispered, "if this is still too soon, I'll wait, as long as it takes." She stared into his eyes, searching for anything false. She found nothing. "I'm not ready," she said honestly. "I know. But don't stop being here," she added. "I won't." And with that he left. No kiss, no pressure. Just a promise, quietly spoken in the dark. The shift was subtle at first. Elena began to smile more freely, her eyes lighting up in ways she had forgotten they could. Even her friends noticed. "You're different," said Nina, her closest. "Confidant one evening over wine. Lighter, like you're breathing again." Elena didn't deny it. She was breathing again, but each breath was cautious, calculated. Hope still felt like thin ice. Daniel, too, was changing. Colleagues at his firm whispered about it. He no longer barked orders, no longer seemed distant or distracted. He started volunteering on weekends, took fewer business calls after hours. The man who had once been consumed by ambition now made room for quiet, for reflection, for someone other than himself. Yet for all their progress, something remained unspoken between them. A question hanging in the air like fog. What are we now? One Sunday afternoon, they met at an art gallery. Elena led him through rooms of color and silence, stopping at a canvas filled with fractured reds and muted golds. "This one reminds me of you," she said. "Why?" he asked, curious. "Because it's beautiful," she replied. "But you only see the pain if you really look." Daniel didn't respond. He just looked at the painting longer than he needed to. Afterward, they went to her apartment for tea. Rain tapped gently at the windows. They talked about childhood dreams, awkward teenage years, how both of them had built entire identities around the need to protect their hearts. "I used to think love was about being enough for someone," Elena said. "Now I think it's about being seen in your not-enoughness and still being chosen." Daniel turned toward her, his expression unreadable. "Then let me choose you," he said softly. "Not because you're perfect, but because you're real." She looked down. Her fingers gripped the teacup too tightly. "You can't choose someone until you forgive yourself," she whispered. The silence that followed was heavy, because she was right, and he knew it. Daniel had been rebuilding his life piece by piece, but he hadn't yet faced the truth at its center, guilt for ignoring her, for never looking deeper, for making her believe she had to become someone else just to be seen. That night, Daniel walked through the city alone. The neon lights of Manhattan reflected in puddles like fractured stars. He passed the building where they first met, the one where he had seen her only as a housekeeper. The shame stung more now than ever. He called his father from a payphone, something he hadn't done in years. They spoke briefly, awkwardly, two men stitched together by shared ghosts. But when Daniel hung up, he felt something loosen inside. A tether snapping, not cleanly but enough to feel different. Back in her apartment, Elena stood at the window watching the street. She wasn't waiting for him, not anymore. But part of her still wondered, what if he doesn't come back this time? The next day he did, with no words at first, just a look, worn, honest, vulnerable. "I forgave myself," he said, "because I can't love you fully until I do." Elena stared at him, her heart pounding. She wanted to believe him. But belief, she knew, is a slow unraveling. So she stepped aside, letting him in, not as a lover, not yet, but as a man who was learning how to earn love, not with grand gestures, but with truth. It was nearly midnight when Daniel showed up again. No umbrella, rain soaking his hair, his coat clinging to his frame. Elena opened the door, startled by the knock. Her first instinct was worry, but when she saw his eyes, she knew this wasn't about drama. It was about something breaking open, something real. He didn't speak right away. She didn't ask. She stepped aside and let him in, the way someone opens a door to a memory they aren't sure they're ready to face. Daniel stood in her small living room, dripping on the hardwood, breathing as though he'd run for miles. In a way, he had. "I didn't know where else to go," he said finally, voice raw. "You don't have to explain," Elena replied, her tone soft. She brought him a towel. He dried his face, then sat on the couch, elbows on his knees. "I went to her apartment," he said, eyes on the floor. "The woman I was seeing before, the one you saw me with." Elena tensed, the image still haunted her. Red coat, hand in hand. "Why?" "I needed to close that door properly," he said. "Not just for you, for me." I told her the truth, that I was never fully present, that someone else had been in my heart long before I realized it. Her breath caught, but she didn't speak. She wasn't ready to give in, not yet. Daniel turned to her, eyes searching. "You changed me, Elena, not because you loved me, but because you stopped." The words hit her like wind in an open window, sudden, cold, clarifying. "I didn't stop," she said quietly. "I just let go." "I know, and that's what woke me up." The silence between them grew thick. The room felt smaller, closer. Daniel leaned back, exhaustion folding over him. "I don't want to pretend to be okay anymore, not with you, not with myself." "Then don't," she replied. He looked at her. "Can I stay? Just tonight. I don't expect anything. I just don't want to be alone." She hesitated. Every part of her screamed caution, but another part, deeper, older, felt peace. Not romance, not danger, just presence. So she nodded. "You can take the bed," she said. "I'll stay on the couch." "I don't mind the couch," he offered. "No," she replied, a small smile forming. "My house, my rules." They didn't speak much after that. She gave him fresh clothes from an ex's drawer she hadn't touched in years. He changed. She laid out blankets on the couch. As he walked toward the bedroom, he paused in the doorway. "Thank you," he whispered. She nodded. "Good night, Daniel." That night, neither of them slept deeply. Both lay in separate rooms, hearts racing, minds spiraling with everything unsaid. But beneath the questions, beneath the wounds, was something else, quiet. Not the silence of absence, but the calm of knowing someone is near. In the darkness, Eleanor whispered to no one, "Please don't disappear again." And on the other side of the wall, Daniel heard her, and answered in his heart, "I won't." The morning sun crept softly through the blinds, laying golden lines across the floor like quiet promises. Elena stirred first. She had barely slept, not because of fear or tension, but because something had shifted inside her. The space that Daniel now occupied in her apartment felt strange, but not invasive, more like a memory made tangible. She tiptoed to the kitchen and began boiling water for tea, her every movement slow, intentional. She wasn't sure if he'd be awake. She wasn't even sure if she wanted him to be. The silence of the apartment was not heavy. It was full of the things neither of them had said the night before, full of questions she wasn't sure she wanted answers to. When she finally peeked into the bedroom, she found him already, sitting at the edge of the bed, shirt wrinkled from sleep, hair a mess, eyes cast downward as if he had been weighing his thoughts since dawn. He looked up when he sensed her there. No smile, just acknowledgement. "I didn't want to sleep," he said. "I was afraid I'd wake up and it would all feel like a mistake." Elena leaned against the doorframe. "And does it?" He shook his head. "No, it feels like a beginning." She wasn't ready to echo that sentiment, but she didn't dismiss it either. They had tea together in the kitchen. No music, no chatter, just the clinking of cups and the occasional exchange of glances. The quiet between them wasn't awkward. It was reverent, like something sacred was forming in the air between their breaths. "Do you remember the first time we were in the same room?" Elena asked suddenly, her voice softer than porcelain. Daniel blinked. "No, I'm sorry." She nodded slowly. "It was at Logan's birthday. I was in the kitchen, pouring sangria. You were talking about ski trips and Patagonia gear like it was second nature." He smiled faintly, remembering the version of himself she was describing. "And you?" "I was invisible," she replied, not bitterly, just truthfully. "But I watched you all night, and for some reason I just knew, or thought I did. I wish I'd seen you then." She let that linger in the air. After breakfast, Daniel offered to leave, but Elena didn't answer right away. She walked to the window instead, arms crossed over her chest. "I don't know what this is," she said. "It doesn't have to be anything yet," he replied. "It can just be us, as we are." "That's not a simple thing," she said, turning to face him. "Us, as we, is complicated." "I'm not looking for simple," he said. "I'm just looking for real." She studied him, searching for cracks in the sincerity, but there were none. He wasn't trying to impress her. He wasn't trying to win. He was just trying. "You can stay for lunch," she said finally. It wasn't a declaration of love. It wasn't even a step forward, but it was something. Later they cooked together, Elena slicing vegetables with quiet precision, Daniel fumbling through a recipe she'd already memorized. They laughed once, truly laughed, when he accidentally burned the garlic. It felt foreign and familiar all at once. When they sat down to eat, Daniel looked at her with a softness that made her shift in her seat. "You know," he said, "I don't think I ever tasted food before you." She rolled her eyes, smiling despite herself. "You're being dramatic." "No," he said, his tone turning sincere again. "I mean it. You made everything feel cared for, like someone thought about what I needed before I even knew I needed it." She looked down, unsure of how to respond. The woman she had been, the one who'd orchestrated every detail to impress him, was still in there. But now she wanted to be seen for more than her effort, for who she was without the disguise. "I don't want you to love me because of the way I cared for you," she said. "I want you to care for me back." "I do," he said quietly. And for the first time, she believed he might be telling the truth. A week passed before Daniel returned. Not because Elena had asked him to stay away, she hadn't, but because he sensed the rhythm of her heart required space. Space to trust again, to test whether the version of him now emerging could exist without constant presence. It wasn't distance out of fear. It was distance out of respect. During that week, Elena found herself thinking about him at the strangest times, folding laundry, watering the plants, passing the park where they used to meet. His absence was different now, not an ache, but a gentle echo, something unfinished, something waiting, and she didn't hate the feeling. It made her feel less like a woman who had given too much, and more like one who still had a choice. Daniel, meanwhile, spent his days in uncomfortable self-examination. He cancelled 2 major meetings just to walk alone through Central Park, retracing conversations in his mind. He visited his father again, this time with real questions, not rehearsed ones, and he sat in silence longer than ever before, learning to hear his own voice without performance. One evening, Daniel sent her a photo, an old, blurry snapshot of their mutual friend's birthday years ago. He had found it in an old drive. In the background, Elena stood near the edge of the frame, laughing at something just out of view. "I was wrong," the message said. "I did see you once. I just didn't realize you were the whole picture." Elena stared at the message for minutes, her thumb hovering over the screen, unsure whether to respond. But in her chest, something cracked open. Not pain, not desire. Something in between, like forgiveness in its earliest form. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. The next morning, he was at her door again, this time holding nothing but a notebook. "I wrote something," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "A letter?" "No," he said. "A list." He handed her the notebook and stood back. She opened it slowly, scanning the pages. Line after line, memories, observations, things he had noticed about her, how she always stirred her tea 3 times clockwise, how she never touched paperbacks with creased spines, how she hummed softly when nervous, each entry more intimate than the last. "I didn't know how to say I love you," he said, "so I wrote everything I never said out loud." She blinked fast, heart hammering. "You think this proves something?" "No," he admitted. "It's not proof. It's a beginning. I wanted you to see that I've been seeing you now, really seeing you." Elena closed the notebook, holding it to her chest like a fragile gift. Her eyes were glassy, but no tears fell. "Do you know what it's like?" she said, voice low. "To be the one who always sees but is never seen?" "Yes," he replied, without hesitation. "Now I do." And that was the moment it happened. The quiet shift. Not a kiss, not a declaration, just the acceptance that the wall between them had become a window, and maybe, soon, a doorway. Later that night, Elena sat alone on the couch, rereading his notebook. Every word was an echo of something she thought only she had felt. For the first time, she didn't feel foolish for the way she had loved him. For the first time, she felt understood. The city outside Elena's window moved as it always had, cars weaving through streets, lights blinking in rhythmic patterns, people chasing pieces of themselves. But inside her apartment, time slowed. She sat on the edge of her couch, Daniel's notebook still in her lap, the weight of his words lingering like heat from a fading fire. She hadn't invited him in that night, but she hadn't asked him to leave either. When he returned the next evening, it wasn't with flowers or declarations. It was with groceries, bags filled with things she liked, ingredients she rarely mentioned but he had remembered. Fresh basil, heirloom tomatoes, sourdough, sea salt, dark chocolate. "You cook now?" she asked, eyebrow raised. "I try," he said. "I thought maybe we could make dinner together. For real this time. No delivery menus. No pretending." She didn't smile. Not exactly, but her lips softened. "All right," she said. "Let's see what you've learned." In the kitchen, something delicate unfolded between them. He fumbled with the pasta. She corrected his knife grip. They bumped hips unintentionally, then intentionally. It wasn't romantic, not overtly, but it was intimate in a way that shook them both. Each small moment built on the last, until the space between them felt thinner than ever. After dinner, they lingered at the table, candles flickering low. The air buzzed with what neither dared name. "I used to think love was something that arrived all at once," Daniel said quietly. "A spark, a thunderclap. But maybe it's something that grows in silence, in choices." Elena watched the flame of the candle dance in his eyes. "You think we're choosing this?" "I think we've already chosen," he replied. "Now we're just waiting to admit it." She looked down. Her fingers traced the edge of her glass. "And what if we're wrong again?" "Then we'll be wrong together," he said. "But this time we won't lie to each other about it." The words landed with a kind of clarity she hadn't expected. For so long, her love had been silent, hidden behind effort and hope. Now, it was standing in front of her, raw, uncertain, but alive. "Daniel," she said, voice low, "I don't know how to stop protecting myself." He reached across the table slowly, carefully, letting his fingers brush hers. "Then let me learn how to protect us." They stayed like that for a long time, hands barely touching, breathing in sync. The moment was too fragile for a kiss, too charged for just words, so they said nothing else. That night he didn't stay over. He didn't have to, because sometimes love is not about proximity. It's about presence. And Daniel was finally present, in every way that mattered. Elena lay awake long after he left, not with fear, but with something else. Stillness, a peace that whispered, "This might finally be the beginning you waited for." And in a small apartment above the hum of the city, two people, once strangers in the same story, finally stepped into the same chapter. It had been a month since Daniel first stepped back into Elena's life, not as the man she had watched from afar, but as someone who now watched her with intent. They spoke nearly every day. Dinners became tradition. Books were exchanged, playlists shared, inside jokes crafted like old memories reborn. Yet something still hovered, unspoken. One Saturday morning, Elena sat at her desk, reviewing a proposal for a new consulting project. She'd started rebuilding her career, slow but steady. But her focus wavered. Her phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. "Coffee later. I miss your sarcastic commentary." She smiled, but her fingers paused above the screen. There was a heaviness inside her lately, a pressure she hadn't named, not even to herself. She liked him, maybe more than liked, but every time he stepped closer, a voice inside whispered, "What if he only loves you now because he lost you once?" That night, she said yes to coffee. They met at a small cafe, tucked into a quiet corner of Soho. Daniel arrived early, waiting with 2 mugs already steaming. When she entered, he stood, not dramatically, just instinctively, and smiled in that soft way he reserved only for her. "Now, something's different," he said before she even sat down. She sighed, not denying it. "I've been thinking." "Dangerous habit." She smirked, but the smile faded. "What if this version of you only exists because of what happened? Because of guilt?" Daniel leaned back, the weight of her question settling in. "Is that what you think? That I'm here to absolve myself?" "I don't know," she said. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm a symbol, a redemption arc. Not a woman you truly want, but a story you need to finish." He didn't speak for a moment. Instead, he looked at her. Really looked. Then he said something she didn't expect. "Maybe you are." Her breath caught. "But not in the way you think," he continued. "You're not my redemption, Elena. You're the reminder that I was always capable of more, that I didn't have to be the man I used to be, that I chose it, and now I choose something else." Elena stared at him, unsure whether to feel comforted or frightened by his honesty. "You taught me," he said, voice low, "that love isn't about being forgiven. It's about being seen and still being invited in." Her chest tightened. "I'm scared, Daniel. Not of you. Of what happens if this becomes real and then falls apart." "Then let's be scared together," he replied. "Let's build something fragile and let it terrify us." She swallowed hard. No one had ever offered her that before. Permission to be afraid and still loved. Not just despite the fear, but because of it. They sat in silence again, the cafe humming around them. He reached across the table, not for her hand this time, but simply to be near, and she let him. On the walk home, neither of them said much. But when they reached her door, she didn't say goodbye. She said, "Do you want to come in?" And this time, she wasn't inviting a guest. She was inviting a future. The apartment was dim, lit only by the street lamp outside her window and the soft golden hue from the kitchen. Eleanor walked in first, not looking back. Her heartbeat was thunder in her ears. This wasn't about passion. It was about surrender. Surrendering the last line of defense between who she was and who she might become with him. Daniel closed the door gently behind them, removing his coat, not speaking. He felt the shift in the air, the reverence of what wasn't being said. She moved to the stove and lit a small kettle, her back to him. He stepped closer, cautiously. "I meant what I said earlier," he began, his voice quiet. "I'm not trying to rewrite the past. I just want to build something honest." "I believe you," she said. "But there's something I haven't told you." He froze. Elena turned, leaning against the counter now. Her eyes didn't waver. "It's not about lies, not this time. It's about pain, mine." Daniel's throat tightened. "Whatever it is, I want to hear it." She took a deep breath, steadying herself like a diver before the plunge. "When I left my job, when I became your housekeeper, it wasn't just about being close to you. It was about escaping something." He listened. "I had just ended a relationship," she continued. "Not serious, not officially, but it ended badly. He made me feel like I was nothing, like I only existed to serve someone else's ego. That's why I disappeared so easily into your world. I knew how to perform affection without receiving it." Daniel's chest ached. "And I became the next stage of that pattern." "Yes," she whispered, "at first." The kettle whistled, softly, but she ignored it. "I thought if I played my role perfectly, maybe you'd see me, maybe I'd become visible. But over time, it stopped being about you. It became about me. I wanted to prove I wasn't broken." Daniel took a step closer. "You were never broken, just unseen. And you were never cruel," she said, "just blind." Silence again, the kind that held two people still in place, unsure if they were on the verge of something holy or catastrophic. "I've never told anyone this," she added. "Not even myself, not fully. Thank you," he said, "for trusting me." She nodded. "Now you know all of it." He looked at her then, not with pity or heroism, but with a kind of clarity she hadn't seen in anyone before. "I don't want a perfect love, Eleanor. I want a brave one." She felt her throat tighten, but no tears came. Instead, she stepped forward, closing the space between them, slowly, placing her hand over his chest. "Then we're both going to have to be very brave." He leaned in, not for a kiss, not yet, but for the silence of her breath on his. And in that quiet, Eleanor finally felt seen. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the past arrived, not with a scream, but with a knock on the door. Elena was alone, preparing a proposal on her laptop, when she heard it, 3 short raps. She wasn't expecting anyone. Her chest tightened with that old instinct, fear dressed as caution. She opened the door slowly, and there he was, Martin, her ex. He looked older, tired, but the same smug confidence lingered in the way he tilted his head. "Elena," he said, as if her name still belonged to him. She didn't speak. "I heard you're seeing someone," he continued, his voice casual, rehearsed. "Daniel Hart, no less. Quite the upgrade." Elena kept her grip on the door tight. "Why are you here?" Martin sighed, hands in pockets. "I'm not here to start anything, just curious. You vanished after you quit your job. No goodbye, no message. I figured you'd crawled into some sad little life. Guess I was wrong." "Leave," she said. Her voice was calm, controlled, deadly quiet. "Relax," he said with a laugh. "I just wanted to see it for myself, what you look like now, all empowered. But you're still the same, aren't you? Still pretending not to need anyone." The words slid off her like rain on stone. "You need to go," she repeated, louder now. Behind her, Daniel's voice cut through the hallway. "She told you to leave." Martin turned slowly. "Ah, the man of the hour." Daniel stepped forward, standing at her side without touching. You don't get to knock on her door anymore. You lost that right." Martin raised his hands mockingly. "Easy, Tiger. Didn't mean to step on your territory." Elena watched Daniel, steady, calm, but unshakably firm. It wasn't about posturing. It was protection without possession. A defense that didn't demand gratitude. Martin smirked. "She'll get tired of you too." "No," Elena said, her voice clear now. "I got tired of you." The door slammed, and with it, the last ghost was exiled. Inside, Elena stood still. Her breath came in quiet bursts, her body trembling not from fear but from release. Daniel reached for her hand, not to calm her, but simply to let her know, "I'm here. Still here." "I'm okay," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "I know," he replied. That night, they didn't talk much. They didn't need to. She rested her head on his chest, and for the first time in years, her body fully relaxed, into someone else's presence. Elena had faced what once broke her, and she had not shattered. Daniel silently made a promise he didn't speak aloud. "I will never let her feel alone in her strength again." Outside, the city buzzed with ordinary noise. But inside that apartment, something extraordinary was beginning. The next morning didn't feel like a milestone. It didn't feel like a dramatic conclusion or a romantic movie ending. It just felt calm. Elena woke to the scent of coffee already brewing. She sat up, disoriented for a moment. Not by where she was, but by the stillness inside her. No rush of fear, no armor being assembled, just breath, just peace. She walked into the kitchen and found Daniel there, barefoot, hair still messy, reading the back of a cereal box like it was poetry. He looked up, smiled, not the kind of smile that tries to win affection, but the kind that assumes it's already earned. "I made you coffee," he said. "Strong, no sugar." She chuckled. "You remembered." "I wrote it in my notebook." They sat down at the small table. The city beyond the window was already loud, but inside everything moved slower. They ate toast, shared silence, told each other small things, what dreams they'd had, what books they were reading, what they wanted for the day. No grand declarations, but Elena kept stealing glances at him, at this man who used to be a fantasy and had become something far more difficult and far more real. After breakfast, she opened her laptop to continue working on her business proposal. Daniel lingered in the doorway. "You sure you don't want me out of your hair?" he asked. "You're not in my hair," she replied, not looking up. "But if you want to stay, hand me that folder on the counter." He did. No need to say more. Hours passed like that. A rhythm formed. Elena deep in concentration, Daniel working from his phone, occasionally breaking the quiet to offer a snack or read a line from an email that annoyed him. They functioned like two souls who had already done the hard part, finding each other, and were now doing the harder part, living beside. each other. That evening they cooked again. More natural this time, less choreography, more chaos. Burned onions, a dropped fork, a splash of wine on her shirt. She laughed freely, the sound richer than he'd ever heard. And Daniel, watching her laugh, knew in his bones he'd never loved anyone before her. After dinner, they didn't watch a movie. They just lay on the couch, feet tangled, a soft record playing. He brushed her hair back. She traced his knuckles with her fingertip. "I used to think love was supposed to hurt," Elena said suddenly, voice barely audible. "That if it didn't ache, it wasn't real." Daniel's eyes stayed on the ceiling. "And now, I think love is supposed to make you feel safe enough to stop pretending." He turned to her, heart swelling. "Then I hope I never stop making you feel that way." Eleanor didn't reply. She just took his hand, and for the first time in a very long time she let herself believe this might really last. Months passed like the slow turning of a page. Not rushed, not dramatic, just steady. Elena's consulting firm began to grow, one quiet client at a time. Daniel, once consumed by status and performance, now worked fewer hours, spent weekends, volunteering at a youth center, and surprised himself with how much joy came from doing less, but doing it with intention. They didn't move in together, not yet. They didn't rush declarations, but there was no question between them anymore. They were building something, real, earned, ongoing. One Sunday they sat on a bench in the same park where she had first watched him without being seen. The irony wasn't lost on her. "You know," Elena said, eyes on the pond, "there was a version of this story where none of this ever happened, where I never took that job, never changed my name, just stayed a woman watching you from across the room." Daniel leaned back, arms stretched out on the bench behind her. "And what would have happened then?" "I don't know," she said. "Maybe nothing, maybe everything." He turned to her, serious now. "I think about that sometimes, about how blind I was, how long I lived, assuming people only mattered when they offered me something." "You didn't ask to be loved," she said. "I offered it without permission." "And I didn't ask to be forgiven," he replied. "But you gave me that too." They were quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, square envelope. Plain, white, no logo. "What's that?" she asked. "A question." She raised an eyebrow. "If there's a ring in there, I swear—" He laughed, handing it to her. "No ring, just read." She opened the envelope. Inside was a single card with 4 words handwritten on it. "Start over with me?" Her breath caught. He wasn't asking for a performance, not a dramatic proposal, just a beginning, clean, mutual, no deception, no chase, no pretending. She looked up at him. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means I want to fall in love with you again, as we are now, no shadows." She stared at him, then slowly nodded. "Okay, but if we're starting over, you need to know something." "What's that?" "I don't do laundry." He grinned. "That's fair. I can't cook pasta." They laughed, real unguarded laughter. Later that night, back in her apartment, Elena opened her old closet. From the very back, she pulled out a folded uniform, the one she'd worn when she first stepped into his life, pretending to be someone else. She held it for a moment, then gently laid it in a donation bag. No need for disguises anymore. The next morning, Daniel made her coffee, strong, no sugar, and left a note on the kitchen table. No bets, no rolls, just us. And somehow, that was worth more than any vow, more than any ring. It was the start of a story no longer built on illusion, but on the radical, terrifying beauty of being fully seen and loved anyway. If you've made it this far, let us know what you thought about the story. And if you're not subscribed yet, don't forget to subscribe to catch all our upcoming stories.